Hi there, Lizod here from Isurus. Today we're going to look at a very cool boost or overdrive pedal, depending on how you use it, which is an old one. The original design goes back to I think the 70s. The one I've got here is still over 10 years old. I think they did this reissue of the Preamp 250 in 2003, and then more recently, I think about 2013, they did another reissue of it, but made a few changes to it. So I'll kind of go through what those are as well. So this one is supposed to be the same circuit as the original one, and it's the same kind of design as well, same sort of layout. It's got the old style 3.5mm power jack, as opposed to the more ubiquitous nowadays 2.1mm Boss type connector. But the 2013 version has the Boss type connection, the more used one nowadays. It's also in a slightly different chassis, I think, similar sort of size, but I think it's a little different. And they've added a status LED. This one, like the original, there's no indication as to whether it's on or off. So the more modern one, you've kind of got that sort of benefit that everyone's used to with effects pedals, you know, nowadays. But back then, I suppose not many did have the old status LED. DOD, obviously quite well-renowned company. They've had various different ranges of pedals over the years. In the sort of 80s and 90s they had loads, then they kind of faded out. I think they've been changed ownership, you know, been bought by different people over the years. And now they started by bringing out a few of their kind of iconic pedals, like this one, the Overdrive Preamp 250, and their phaser. Don't know if there's any others anyway. But now they're starting to put out more under the DOD brand, more different pedals, new designs, I mean. So yeah, let's just take a little look at it. It's as simple as you can get, really, for a sort of overdrive pedal. You've just got gain and volume. So you can see that here, just two knobs and an on and off switch, simple as. But it's a really nice circuit. It's very very clear, very transparent, and to my ears it's got a bit of a kind of brightness to it. I mean, you've got no kind of tone control, but it seems to kind of liven things up a bit, you know, especially when you're sort of pushing an amp into overdrive. So I'll show you just my clean sound, which is just clean channel on the Marshall, kind of just before it's about to break up. And then we'll set this sort of in the centre. So you can see it's kind of that's the central position of it, so it's kind of a good sort of light gain overdrive. But you can, of course, you could use this as a boost by kind of, because it's got separate gain and volume, if you want to just kind of add a tiny little bit of gain but kind of add a lot of clean boost to it, then you use a lot of the volume and less of the gain. Or if you want to heavily distort it, you wind the gain up and you bring the volume down, so you've got less overall level but more gain, kind of thing. It's, you know, like having two separate gain stages. And that's one thing I think is really useful about all kind of overdrives, really, is using them in sequence. So either using like a boost and overdrive and then into a dirty amp, or, you know, or whatever, a compressor with giving you a bit of extra gain and an overdrive, and then into a dirty channel of an amp can give you a really thick kind of heavy tone. But we'll just start with using this as a quite a light kind of overdrive. So it kind of gives you that little bit of bite and aggression. It's cool. So we'll wind the gain up a little. It's going to get a bit noisy, but so it's actually got quite a lot of gain. I mean, even though it's just an overdrive, it's got quite a lot of kick to it, really. But then you can use it kind of more subtly by winding the gain down and maybe giving it more volume. It's a really nice sounding overdrive, really. It's sort of, I was always wary of this kind of pedal where you don't have a tone control. I've always used something kind of similar to a tube screamer kind of layout, where it's volume, gain and tone, or and then you get overdrive pedals that can have low and high, or all three, have mids or even scoopable, tweakable mids. Which obviously gives you a lot more control of the sound. But since kind of using boost pedals, which is just gain, you have nothing, just one knob, and things like this, I've kind of really noticed the value of them, because they tend to be, because they're much simpler circuits, they tend to let a lot more of your tone through and the sound of the amp, and they're not really affecting it as much. They're kind of just giving it that extra kick, that extra bit of gain, that extra lift, but without kind of colouring the actual tone of it too much, which is very useful, I find. So yeah, it's got quite a lot of gain on tap, really. So let's try using it on an already dirty amp. So this is the crunch channel of my Marshall. This is what that sounds like. Okay, and then we're going to kick in this. Unfortunately, due to no LED, you're not going to really be seeing it. You'll just see when I push it. You won't be seeing the light, so knowing when it's on or not, but you'll just have to watch out for when I turn it on and off. So you can hear it kind of obviously gives it more gain, but the sort of more important thing is it kind of in a way sort of tightens it up, because it sort of squishes and compresses the signal, because it's so amplified by the time you're hitting the valves in the amp, that you get this really kind of thick, squidgy sort of sound, but with a lot of definition and pick attack. You can really hear how the pick attack kind of tightens up. So this with it off. Which is cool, you know. It's giving you that extra kind of kick and boost to it, and giving you more gain. So I'm just going to mess around with the controls here. And because this goes, when you turn this all the way down, volume and gain, it is literally off, so I'll just demonstrate that. The important thing to kind of think about with a pedal like this is to do with how you balance the gain and volume, because if you turn either of them up, it's going to increase volume, but turning the gain up increases volume in a different way, in sort of making it dirtier. So think of it as you've got kind of a dirty volume and a clean volume. So if you want less drive, you just have the less of the dirty volume in there, and you kind of boost the cleaner volume knob. And then the inverse, if you want to more heavily distorted to keep the volume level consistent, increase the gain and bring the volume down to compensate. So you're sort of always balancing those two depending on how dirty you want the signal. You can really hear that kind of squishing and squishy and crunchiness going on. It's really cool. Yeah, I think it's a cool, really cool pedal, really useful. I use it a lot for kind of low gain stuff. It's also good in this sort of situation like I'm using now with a dirty amp and just hitting it harder at the front end. But still, I'd prefer in a way to have an overdrive with a tone control in it, like a Tube Screamer style circuit or something, because at least you've got some kind of control of the sort of overall frequency of the overdrive you're generating, I suppose. but it's not as vital as I always used to think, you know. This kind of pedal really has its uses, especially if you want a very stripped down, clear signal where you can really hear, you know, the EQ settings you've got on the amp and your guitar, basically. If you don't want them messed with at all, if you've got a particular sort of sound you're after, or you want it to not mutate your amp too much, then this kind of pedal is an awesome tool.